We are back digging for wisdom one last time in the regular season as we are reaching week 11, which is the final week. We got to figure out who's in the playoffs. We got to figure out who's winning district titles. And that's what we have Professor Diggs here for. He can tell you everything, and I'm here feeding him. I'm the straight man. I'll feed him the lines, and he'll give you the information. Wizord with Diggsy. Diggsy, it took you a while, but you got over your Plano East thing. Hopefully by now you're over it. And now you're concentrating on the next game that they have to win. So you're forgetting about the past and concentrating on the next, because that's what a lot of teams have to do this week. They got to there's teams out there that had to get wins and didn't get them, and now their playoff situation is a little bit tougher. You got to put that stuff behind you, because a bunch of these teams are playing on Thursdays now to get their season over with and get that extra day for practice for the playoffs, but they got to make them first. Interesting strategy going into week 11 for some of these teams. Talk to me about, if you were a coach, which you aren't, but if you were a coach, your mindset going into week 11, playing all that way, and now it's do or die for a lot of these teams. I know we're going to talk about 10-6A and some of these other districts. It's do or die.
We're going to talk about every district, Ward. That's what we're going to do on this podcast. Every 6A and 5A Division I, Division II district, we're going to talk about it. So if you're a fan of high school football in North Texas, from 3-6A to the 6-6A Division II, tune in. We got you, Ward. But one of my favorite conversations with coaches, and I've actually had several conversations this week with coaches, is about those hypothetical situations. I know one of our favorite games 5 or 10 years ago was the Justin Northwest Keller game, where there was a last-second field goal and the losing team was happy and the winning team was distraught. And we had a little bit of that last week in 6-6A at the very least, with Plano East and Prosper Rock Hill and McKinney and Plano, because you had both these games going on simultaneously. You had Rock Hill trying to score with like 30 seconds left in the game when they should just be taking knees because they needed extra points. You had a coach talking to Plano East in his headset because Plano East is driving. And do we need to get a touchdown to win by 6, or do we just need to win at all? And they got the thing that, okay, game is over, any win happens. So then they tried to kick a game-winning field goal, and they didn't get the game-winning field goal. But I mean, it was real time. I mean, just people, coaches and ears and all kinds of stuff getting the information. And I think this week we're going to see more of the same, because we got point scenarios, we got all kinds of things. There are situations where you can send a team to a different playoff bracket, and might make you a little bit better. Right now, Ward, we have a potential possibility in 6-6A, and we'll talk about more than just 6-6A, where Prosper, if they end up going Division I, they got to play Coppell in the first round. So there are certain different situations there versus playing Flower Mound or Flower Mound Marcus in the first round. So all kinds of scenarios, Ward, and who's going to break them down? That's you, Ward. You're going to break them down. Here's the microphone, Ward. Let's hear it.
You're going to shut it up. You're going to shut it up and let me take over the whole thing. All right, let's go ahead and eliminate you from this podcast. Boy, that'd be an awesome podcast for everybody, just to hear me talk about complete nonsense,
sit there
without any freaking knowledge of anything, and all the calls you made and tiebreaker information you figured out. All I figured out is what Kalik Lockett told me. He's like, if so-and-so wins, we're going to be playing Heath, and we're going to be playing North Forney. But we'll figure all that later on going in there. But there's been, you start talking about teams that are still in it and still not in it. Well, there's some teams that overcame some things because we had already shoveled dirt on them, and they're no longer getting the dirt shoveled on them because they flipped things up a little bit. They pulled this joint. Oh, my God. Overcoming the shovel. Some of these teams have done it. Undertaker style.
Frisco Emerson, we buried them. We said goodbye, Frisco Emerson.
2 weeks ago.
Your season is done 2 weeks ago, but we said they needed 3 things to happen. And guess what happened, Ward? Those dominoes all fell. And now the Melissa Cardinals, almost a top 5 team in any rankings, state ranked, are not making the playoffs, which means they get the shovel. But Frisco Emerson, they're back.
They are back.
And they get Argyle in the first round. And how do you guys feel about Argyle now? Looking at that, like, That's who we got to play after we just got the Undertaker act. They don't want to see any of that.
A team that they're familiar with too, from their last two districts, and all of a sudden,
Oh,
boom,
3
they're right
5A
there.
Division II rematch
They're
right
right
there.
there. We were worried about, man, are they even going to be? How can Kendall Miller get them motivated? Because it looks like it's all but over. He found a way, and now they're going to be playing that 11th game at least. So that's a reversal shovel of the ways of likes we've never seen before. Is there any other reversals?
I mean, when we talk about reversals, I mean, one of them, and it's a little bit of a bigger story that, we'll talk about as we get going, is also the Seagoville Dragons, because Seagoville we completely wrote off, but administratively now, with some big news in 5-5A Division 2, they might be coming back. We still got to get some more words. We got meetings, Ward. We got Zoom meetings. We got all kinds of stuff this week. We just kind of pulled back the curtain a little bit. We taped this on the weekend, and the meetings are going to be during the early part of the week. But I think from all of the sources I've heard privately, Samuel will not be qualified for the playoffs. And if they are, we apologize again earlier in the week, which means Seagoville is back to a win and in situation. We gave Seagoville the shovel when they played Samuel earlier this year. But I think they've overcome the shovel.
They've overcome it. They may not have done it the way Emerson did, but they've overcome it somehow. So they've overcome the shovel.
No matter. There's no style points in DEC meetings, Ward. No style points in those.
Well, let's keep it on the positive. Who are you tossing flowers at this week?
And I think we should toss it for us, Ward, because I don't think there's been any situation where we've been harder on a team and then they finally implement our suggestions, and all of a sudden they're back, and that is the Louisville Fighting Farmers. We have been so hard on Louisville, Ward. I know, like, you go down to like Golden Chick, and like you want to get like a little Golden Chick meal from like on Main Street over there, and they won't even, if you're wearing your hat, they won't even talk to you. You're like, Ward, we see the podcast. You get nothing. You get no extra sauce with your Golden Chick. We won't even let you pay for it. And I know now you got to go down to like Highland Village to start getting your food and your fast food. Louisville wanted nothing to do with you, Ward. And I don't go to Louisville, so I don't have to deal with that kind of thing. But that's your backyard. But what has Louisville done? They've stuck to the run. They've played good, aggressive defense, and all of a sudden they beat Denton Geyer. Coach Odell, offensive coordinator. Here's some flowers. Here's a bouquet.
And I hear
beautiful. Great.
And I saw they had some helicopters landing nearby to get some college coaches in there to help see if Coach Odell's actually going to implement Dixie's plan. And he's, Venables and I think Sark was out there too. They both said, "Yeah, we okay. This way to listen to Diggs. We're going to go fly off somewhere else now."
Sounds like a good plan. Run the ball, good defense. And now all of a sudden you've got Allen who's looking at Louisville in the first round of the playoffs, and they got to be like, because remember last year was almost a complete difference. Louisville was coming in, with kind of some senior experience, and you had Allen who was really young and banged up, and then all of a sudden Allen beats Louisville and they go on a run. Now we kind of got the other thing going on, Ward. We got Louisville who's got a little bit of momentum. They're going to be coming in young. If they can pull the upset, they can go on a run.
And I told you last week that game, I mean, those two guys, that's going to be one of my favorite matchups unless this Capel prospect thing happens. But those teams offensively at least mirror themselves. So they're so equal. They're Spider-Man mean equal. And that's going to be an interesting game. And they've played each other so many times in the past in the playoffs the last couple of years. But this one's got a little bit more intrigue to it for me if that happens. So talk about 10-6A too. Who else gets flowers out of that district?
Man, we've been kind of alluding to it. We've been talking about Rockwall Heath because the way they played the way they played Longview, and I was like, man, Rockwall Heath looks like they figured it out, but we thought it might be a little bit too late. Now they're getting to play Forney straight up for a playoff spot. They get some flowers. They beat crosstown rival Rockwall this past week, and it was a 31-28 game, so the score doesn't really indicate but every time I looked at the scoreboard, they were ahead. It was like, they just kind of always stayed one step ahead. It was like 2 score, 1 score, 2 score, 1 score kind of a game. Rockwall Heath Get some flowers. Coach Webb does not want to go off into the night, gently into the night, and just go into being an athletic director. He has said, remember when we talked about this on the campfire, that this young group that he has is what's got him excited. And, there are going to be names we hadn't heard of yet, but they're going to get better every single week. And they have. That's exactly what has happened with Rockwell Heath. And now they are on the doorstep of I was going to say precipice, but I'm not a teacher right now. I'm talking high school football. I need to use big words. They are on the doorstep of a playoff.
Dumb it down for us. To dumb it down even more, a couple of their losses were one-score games. I mean, it's not like they just got some bad luck against Tyler Legacy. They lost by a point, and then in overtime they lost to North Forney by a touchdown. And we talked about the Longview game. So, yeah, they are starting to play ball at the right time. Anybody else on the old flower watch?
What about Mesquite Horn? I mean, this was a team that we kind of like Garland got decimated by transfers, figured they were out. They beat they weren't previously in the last week, but at one point, Cedar Hill was a state-ranked team this year, and they just beat the brakes off of Cedar Hill. That game was like 35-7 in the second quarter, and they pretty much ran away with that. Mesquite Horn has a bunch of young talent, and they're all showing out right now. Watching them grow up is fun. I didn't think they wanted to use all the young kids right now. They wanted to let them kind of sit and let some of these seniors, but the seniors left, and they're in it, and they have kind of figured something out. They beat Cedar Hill. They got a very good young core, and it's like, Ward, we've already taped everything we taped about Mesquite Horn last year. We can just put it in this year because they got a young group of kids who are looking really good. As long as they stay at Mesquite Horn, I think Mesquite Horn is going to be a dangerous team next year.
Right. And you've mentioned this in podcasts before, you're big on, even if you're out of it, finishing the season strong, just have something to build on during the off season. And they look like they're doing just that. I don't know who they have in week.
Win the last game.
Who do they have in week 11? That's the question. Are they playing Mesquite? They may be playing Mesquite.
They already lost to Mesquite, but
never mind.
I think Skyline maybe. We'll find.
Okay. We'll figure that out later on. Anybody else get the shovel? We mentioned a little bit with Melissa. I was at that game last week. They were all kinds of pumped up, had all kinds of face paint on. I couldn't run the pregame speech one of the coaches gave because I couldn't find enough beat buttons to put in there, but it got me motivated. I was like, all right, they're going to go out here and do some things. And they didn't go out and do the things they needed to do. They got shut down the second half completely. And they let them kick the 3 field goals in the second half and lost to Walnut Grove, and now they're out. And now they're probably going to get a shovel.
And they get the shovel, and pretty much every team we're not going to talk about this week, they've got the shovel as well, because you're done. If we're not talking about you, you don't matter, and you're done. Right. So everybody's getting their shovels this week if they haven't made it. But Ward, because of all these odd districts, we got some 9-team districts and some 7-team districts. There's going to be a lot of teams with byes this week that they're done. So we're going to be sending some teams off to basketball season already.
Who's getting ready for hoops? Who you got getting ready for hoops already?
We're saying goodbye. We hate to say goodbye, but you know what? You can stick with Inside High School Sports. We may not have a podcast for you about basketball, but our guys, all our camera guys, will be at all the games. We'll give you some highlights. Lakeview Centennial, they usually get some highlights. They usually find a way to get into the basketball season. Goodbye, Lakeview Centennial. Tyler Legacy, I know you would just wish we could send them away, period, because you hate talking about out-of-area teams. But Tyler Legacy, they're done. They're out. Keller Fossil Ridge. Keller Fossil Ridge is one of those teams that ended on a high with a couple of wins at the end of the season. So I think Fossil Ridge, they're going to basketball season with a smile on their face. Fort Worth Polytechnic, my Parrots, they're flying off the coop. And Cleburne, saying goodbye to Cleburne. Enjoy basketball season or volleyball playoffs or whatever your enjoyment is.
Whatever you're doing. That you get a jump start on your inventory for football season. How many shoulder pads you guys are bringing back? Yeah, water polo. That championship was 2 weeks ago. They're not doing that yet. But you got to be, make sure you get enough helmets. You gave out 55 helmets. You make sure 55 come back. Don't take them home with you. Or don't give them to Channel 5 for props unless you want to. We like to have the props. All right. Let's get into
Word at wearegameday.com if you want to send them some.
Exactly. Send me, let me know where these helmets are coming from. I don't know how you're going to send a helmet through an email, but just try it anyway. We'll figure it out. All right, now we have titles, playoff spots available. Let's start right into it, 3-6A, and talk about their.
It's like the dope board. We're starting with 3-6A.
Start with it.
We're going around the horn.
let's talk about that district championship at Crowley ISD Thursday. Uh, we don't feel like it's going to be too terribly close, but Crowley's playing some good football of late, so maybe they'll hang with them for a little while. Crowley, North Crowley.
I don't think they're going to hang with them very long. But North Crowley versus Crowley is the district championship, undefeated versus undefeated. North Crowley, this is really their chance. And the way the schedule makers kind of set it up, and South Oak Cliff kind of has these problems, but they don't get to have this benefit. They probably have their toughest game right now, which kind of gets them ready for the playoffs because they're going to have Byron Nelson in the first round of the playoffs. So you don't want to have to go from playing Weatherford and Saginaw Boswell to all of a sudden having to play a very hungry Byron Nelson team. But North Crowley should win this game 6-7 touchdowns. They're going to win it big. Both these teams have clinched. They're going to be the top seed in D1 and D2. But there's only one playoff spot, Ward, that is still left in this district, and that's going to come from Mansfield versus Weatherford this week. It's Mansfield Legacy. They're done, but they're in the playoffs. Nothing that happens to them will impact their playoff road. Weatherford will have to win. We'll have to beat Mansfield by enough, I think, like a max win to overcome that three-way tie. So Weatherford is still technically in the playoff race. Mansfield hasn't clinched yet, but Mansfield should be a pretty big favorite over Weatherford. But you never know, Ward. We've seen some crazy things happen in week 11 of the playoffs, and teams we've already given people shovels and seen what happens. So we can't we can't take away the Hypnaroos. Did you see that picture, Ward? The Hypnaroo over there in
I haven't
Weatherford?
seen it, no.
They have like this little hypnotic kangaroo mascot that they put on their big screen. But never write off the Hypnaroos. But I'm writing off the Hypnaroos. I'm taking Mansfield in that game.
Yeah, that's a tall order. Not only you got to beat Mansfield, you got to beat them by max points. So you're asking a lot of the squad, but we'll see what happens. They got to play the games. 4-6A is all settled because a couple teams, Timber Creek down the stretch, just decided we don't want you to figure out tiebreakers. We're just going to go ahead and not win and help you guys out here, which they did. We got our 4 teams.
Yeah, I was almost going to give Keller some flowers because they're kind of one of those hard luck 5th place teams right now. But it looks like they figured it out at the end of the season, but too little, too late when it comes to those Keller Indians. And no blue lights will be on in the playoffs in Keller ISD. But we got South Lake Carroll as our D2 1 seed. We got Euless Trinity as our D1 1 seed. We've got Byron Nelson as our D1 2nd seed. And we've got Just Northwest. They've clinched as the D2 2nd seed in 4-6A in Division Two. So basically, we've almost got all of our playoff matchups set up for this very first round. We're going to have Euless Trinity take on probably Mansfield, but could end up being Weatherford. We're going to have North Crowley against Byron Nelson. We're going to have Crowley take on Just Northwest, which point spread wise could be one of the more competitive games going on. And then we've also got what's the other team here?
Legacy going to Dragon Stadium.
There you go. I got South Lake Carroll going over to Dragon Stadium. So those are pretty much set up in 4-6A and 3-6A because nothing to talk about in 4-6A this week.
I would like to.
You got a decent game in Timber Creek and Justin Northwest. Doesn't matter. You don't have to send the camera crew out there, Ward.
No cameras there. But I would like to hear what you think about. We had our ups and downs with Trinity, but they did manage to get through this thing, barring an upset to LD Bell going 9-1. They're 8-1 right now. That upset can happen. We saw it last year. Your thoughts on them in the playoffs? First Mansfield, and then a West Texas team.
Yeah, I think they can very well get to the 3rd round again, and they're going to be a very dangerous team just because of the style of football they play. Their defense is still a little skeptical. You see that, but if their defense on any given week can play like they did against Justin Northwest, I mean, they shut down Justin Northwest completely.
Yeah.
That was one of the bigger wins, other than South Lake Carroll, in that district that they've had because they've been kind of letting some of these other teams stick around. They could absolutely make a run. They're an even team, so they're looking at in the 3rd round playing a 6-6A, 8-6A team. Probably not going to be an 8-6A, so 6-6A. So to me, that's probably playing Allen in the 3rd round. But we know when you get Trinity and Allen in the 3rd round, throw out the records, throw out what's going to happen. Or maybe Louisville, if Louisville is able to beat Allen, and then you probably have North Crowley on the other side of that. So definitely 3 rounds, maybe 4 rounds. I could see it.
I can see it too. I think that's a team we'll be talking about for a couple, 3-4 more weeks. So interesting stuff. Let's talk 5-6A. Capel has clinched the district title. So how is that going to affect the way they play Marcus? Because Marcus needs to win over Capel, and if had they not clinched, we both would say they have absolutely no chance. But maybe they are letting Edward Griffin and Weston Polk just kind of relax a little bit and chill. What do you think about that? And then, of course, if they don't do that and they go out and do what they're supposed to do to Marcus, then it comes down to Flower Mound and Hebron for that last spot.
Yeah, Flower Mound has to beat Coppell to overcome the loss
Marcus.
and get out of that three. Marcus has to beat Coppell to overcome that three-way loss. That the Mound Showdown and what's happened in that pocket of things with the way that Hebron beat him. Because really, the way that Hebron beat him is just put him so behind the point differential. So when they beat Flower Mound by 1 in the Mound Showdown, just doesn't really impact anything. So they got to beat Coppell to overcome that tiebreaker. And I don't know that like you said, Coppell, from what I saw last year when Coppell was in the Plano ISD district, they will shut things down. I think they're looking more at the big picture, especially if they have to have a first round game against Prosper, where you want to have everybody healthy. You cannot afford to have Edward Griffin any sort of injured. So what I think Coppell will probably do, maybe play a half and then just kind of put the backups in. But is Flower Mound Marcus good enough? And then we're going to have this question with Allen and Plano East in 6-6A to still win that game,
Right.
even if Coppell is not playing their best players. And probably, like I'll say in 6-6A, I don't think they are good enough to win that game. But if it's a situation where if Flower Mound Marcus can keep it close until they pull out some of those players, you could absolutely see a kind of a turnaround in that game where Marcus pulls an upset. So keep an eye on that. But Marcus just has played so
Yeah.
abysmally against the good teams. I think Coppell can get up 3 or 4 scores and just coast and not have to worry.
I think if they had clinched at 8-1, then maybe they shut down. But 10-0 means something to a team, whether they'll admit it to you or not. Not having a blemish on your record, like going into playoffs 10-0 and thinking, okay, I can have the perfect season, go 16-0. That means something. If they had already lost and clinched, then maybe that's a different story. But it'll most likely come down to Flower Mound and Hebron. Tell me what you think about that game.
And we need your injury report, Ward, because it's kind of what Flower Mound is. They've been a MASH unit for a while. And from what I'm seeing, it's not looking good that they're going to have Carter Massey and some of
No,
their
he's
top
done.
players.
His
Yeah,
collarbone is done. Yeah.
and and when you got Hebron basically playing really good football right now, I mean, beating Denton, Braswell, and Little Elm does not really inspire a lot of confidence. But still, it shows you the style points. They did it with the style points that you needed because remember Marcus struggled for a half with Braswell. And you're
Right.
looking at that, and you're looking at that halftime score, and you're like, what's going on there? But Hebron just shut that down and just completely dominated them. So I think Hebron is a favorite over Flower Mound. And if Flower Mound's able to win the game, I don't know that they're going to win that game by enough to get over that hump because Flower Mound's got to overcome the fact that Hebron's already got a max win on Marcus. So Flower Mound's going to have to win that game, by how many ever points that they're going to have to win it by. I think it's like 10 plus. I don't think they're good enough to win that game by that much. So I think Hebron will play a very conservative style, knowing they've already got points in their back pocket. So I think Hebron will I'm not going to say definitely because you never know. Hebron is a big favorite to make the playoffs, whether they win or not in this game. But I think they'll take care of business on the scoreboard. But I don't think that Flower Mound's going to, even in a situation where Hebron has a couple of turnovers, I just don't think Flower Mound has enough to overcome that point differential if that happens. So
That's
I
the
think Hebron is going to the playoffs.
That's the key thing because if it was a true win in your end game, we would be talking differently because we never know what Hebron team's going to show up on any given night. And I know this means everything, but still, you never really know with that squad. I can never tell which one's going to come. So hopefully the good one will show up, and we'll see a good ball game, and we'll figure it out by points if we have to. Otherwise, Hebron wins straight up. All right, 6-6A, the team that they got to play next. 5-6A plays 6-6A. This one's kind of wonky. I mean, we know we have a McKinney Rock Hill game that means just about everything over there. And then your Plano East Panthers have got to find a way to pull off the upset of upsets and beat Allen.
beat Allen. It's basically a playoff game for Plano East. So they get to go into it as that mentality because you think of what the first round of the playoffs look like, and remember Allen was in a different district. You have to go when you're the 2 seed. You got to go to the 1 seed stadium, and you got to overcome that. The only difference in this is how much motivation does Allen have. Now you said earlier that you think like with Coppell, 10-0 does matter, but when you're Allen, just like when you're Coppell, you're looking at who you're potentially playing. You got to be healthy because you're going to have a banger of
Yes.
a first round game. And for Allen, losing Brady Bricker, losing their running back like Micah Ellis, losing one of those key players against Louisville who is hungry and motivated, you can't have that happen. And it's senior night. So Allen has enough players to where I think they can pull back a little bit and go, okay, let's get some of our players in there. You may see Allen pull back and still be a favorite in that game because Allen is set. If you remember Allen kind of in the early 2010s, they had those tiers. They put their
Yeah.
backups in and it was still bad. They're still beating up teams, and then they had to go third and fourth string, and that's how Allen kind of got their reputation of having that kind of powerhouse mentality because so many backup players got so much experience in some of these games that they just were so deep. So Allen has a really good chance to do that, and I think knowing the personality of Allen, they will do that. I think they will play for a first half. I think you might see the defensive players play a little bit longer into the second half, but I don't think they're going to risk getting anybody hurt. I think they're going to keep it very vanilla, keep it very plain. All that being said, Plano East is a 3-4 touchdown underdog in this game, so I don't know that even with Allen pulling off, I think you might see a little bit of a closer game. I don't think Plano East is going to be able to go to Allen Stadium and pull off an upset. Allen versus Plano East, this has been a rivalry. It's been a one-sided rivalry. I think you got one of these in Katy where one of them just hasn't ever,
Yeah.
won in 20 or 25 years. And this is Plano East and Allen. Last time that Plano East beat Allen was 2000. So, I've been married for 17 years and my wife has never seen a Plano East win over Allen. We have a lot of, I have to warn you about this, Ward, because every year I got to talk about it. I have an ongoing promise that if Plano East ever beats Allen in Allen, I will do a shirtless one-man storm and I will be arrested. That will happen. And the Balding Eagle Booster Club already has money set aside to bail me out. They're very they understand, so they've got some money set aside. You may get a phone call, from Kim Garner about the guy, but I won't be representing Inside High School Sports. I'll be in my Plano East shirt. Well, I'll have no shirt on, so they might remember that. But could you see a shirtless one man storm? Never rule it out, Ward. Never rule it out.
Yeah, that would be a problem for us. We'd have to cut you loose, and we'll have to pull somebody else out. We can't have you out there shirtless. So on that note, let's go out. Hey, so it's the easiest thing before I get you talking about the most difficult thing. Allen wins, Rock Hill wins. Then we have our four players. We have 4 teams. We don't have to worry about nothing. But if Rock Hill wins and Plano East wins, or if McKinney beats Rock Hill, tell us the scenarios there.
Yeah, we had to kind of break some hearts because McKinney thought that they clinched the playoffs in beating Plano East. But no, 2 losses is not good enough to get you into the playoffs quite yet because Rock Hill only has 3 losses. Plano East only has 3 losses, and Plano East can still mathematically beat that Allen game. Right now, Plano East, if you got Plano East Allen, or you got Plano East Rock Hill and McKinney in a 3-way tie, because Plano East only lost to McKinney by 1, they're stuck at 1 and they can only go down. So you got Plano East already in the field at 6, so they will win. They will make a playoff berth if they beat Allen under any circumstance. Then you got to figure out Rock Hill and McKinney. And if Rock Hill then wins by 4 over McKinney, they have overcome McKinney's point differential, and they are in the playoffs. And McKinney would be 3 losses and not into the playoff scene. So I know a lot of teams are cheering for Allen to take care of business over Plano East. But then you got Plano over here, and Plano is looking at things because they have a week 11 bye, so they're not playing this week. They need Rock Hill to lose and Plano East to lose. If that happens, they've already won the tiebreaker. So they would be going into the playoffs, and they would go to Coppell in the first round. So Coppell will either play Plano, Plano East, or Prosper in the first round. I can guarantee you who Coppell wants to see in the first round, and it's not Prosper. They'd rather see Plano or Plano East.
Too.
So that's kind of how the scenarios look. So lots of different things can happen, and those games are all on Thursday night. So it's going to be kind of all synced up. CW33 will be covering that game. They got the Rock Hill McKinney game. I think if CW33 executives watch our podcast, which they should, because we are the high school football podcasters of note on here, I would say they should go to changing this where they pick all the games at the beginning of the year, because their last two games, they like the last 2 weeks of the year, we're just going to pick whatever's the best game. Stick with that model, because they got Halton and South Grand Prairie last week, and they got Rock Hill and McKinney this week. I think that's going to be a very competitive one-score game. I think you should just go week to week, Ward. That's what I do. I know you want to start talking. You want to talk about where I'm going to be next year in week one.
Yeah,
I don't want to talk about that, Ward.
Where do you think you will be? I'm interested in that. Where do you think you're going to be during?
I'll be at Plano East versus Royce City. I guarantee you that.
Okay, well, I'll call you at Christmas and we'll talk it over, figure out where you're going to be. That's interesting. So, and you tell me CW33 is going to be there. It means that's going to be a long night for the Wizord, because that's my game. So I'll be sitting through TV timeouts like nobody's business. I should have probably sent Ted up there and went ahead and went to Lone Star Reedy, but I've seen both of those teams in the last 2 weeks.
You go talk to Chris Tchaikovsky. He's a good guy.
Time to switch it up. All right. So before we leave off of this, to get Prosper to play Capel, they want Rock Hill to win, right?
Yes. Yeah, if Rock Hill makes it, no Plano schools make it, then Prosper is the one.
That's who we got. All right. We're going to 7-6A, buddy boy. Berkner wants to be eliminated. They've already proven that by losing to all the teams that they need to beat. But they're still not, right? They still got a chance here. They got one more team they need to lose to before they're eliminated, and then they need some Irving Mack help, correct?
Yeah, they got to beat Richardson Pierce, which would be an upset, and then Richardson has to lose to Irving MacArthur. Both of those things have to happen. Even if Berkner pulls an upset over Richardson Pierce, it's not good enough if Richardson beats Irving MacArthur. So both of those things have to happen. I would consider that a 2 to 5% probability. I think Richardson's going to be a big favorite over Irving MacArthur. Irving MacArthur is one of those teams, though, that they play scary football as far as you see glimpses. Like when they played Irving Nimitz, you didn't see those glimpses, but then they beat Irving, and they beat Irving by like 32 points. So Irving MacArthur is good enough when they are playing their best to put a little bit of a scare in Richardson, but I think Richardson will still be a 2-score favorite. But I don't think Berkner can go score for score with Pierce. So I think that's the bigger problem for them. So give Pierce a big win over Berkner. Give Richardson a big win over Irving MacArthur, and Berkner. They're done. They're done.
They're done. And they've been trying to be done for a while here. They really haven't had a solid impression.
They did not have the Frisco Emerson. They did not have the Undertaker.
They did not. They did not. Keep them down and shut that casket. Before we move off this, like I kind of did with Trinity, I would like to hear your thoughts on Pierce, because Pierce has scored 42 or more in 7 games, including like 3 in a row with over 60. They seem to be an offensive juggernaut. When they hit a team that's also an offensive juggernaut, maybe that's going to be an issue. You won't know who they're going to play until Friday of next week, because 8-6A is a mess. But whoever they might play in 8-6A, you give them a fighting chance, of course, right?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean,
probably be a favorite.
You'll send the camera out to that one just because you know how many highlights you're going to get. Because 8-6A is going to put up 70 points just about everything that they do. So you got Pierce out there playing whoever they're going to play. It's going to be an offensive extravaganza. So it's going to be fun for them. I would say Richardson Pierce would probably be a small favorite right now over whoever they play in 8-6A, no matter what permutation. But then in the second round, they're looking at probably Denton Geyer. Denton Geyer's defense will shut that down real quick.
All right. Well, talk to me about what needs to happen in 8-6A for us to get 4 playoff teams, with one of them being Bowie, and who's the rest of them?
Well, I appreciate now that we've had coaches actually contact me from 8-6A, so I know what the tiebreakers are,
sweet.
and I so I kind of know everything. And the big thing is actually going to be it's a problem for South Grand Prairie with the way the tiebreakers work, because the cap in this district is 21 points. A lot of places do 14 or 17, but they knew at that DEC meeting that we're going to see some blowouts. We're going to see some high scoring margins, and that 21 point difference is real bad for South Grand Prairie, because at South Grand Prairie with a 3-loss tiebreaker with Arlington Martin, and South Grand Prairie is already locked in at -7 because they lost by the max to Arlington, which is 21, and then they lost. Then they beat Martin by 14, so they're locked in. Usually when you're at tiebreakers like in 6A, it's like this team won by 3, this team won by 7. You're dealing with real small numbers. But in this one, Ward, we're like, this one won by 21. They lost by 14. So we got some big numbers going on. South Grand Prairie is sitting in at -7. So basically, all Arlington Martin has to do, Arlington is in. So that clinched Arlington being in there, no matter what happens. So Arlington Martin has to win this game by 7 or more points. If they win by exactly 7, we're going to have a coin flip. If they win by 8 or more, they are in the playoffs. And now, given that Arlington doesn't really have much to play for, I think Arlington is still going to play hard, just because what better way to beat Martin and knock them out of the playoffs? I think that matters to them. But Martin just has to win this game by 8 or more to get into the playoff situation. Now you got South Grand Prairie. They still control their own destiny, but they got to beat Arlington Bowie, Ward. And I don't think that's a very tall task, the way Arlington has been playing. And then you got Haltom. They're playing Sam Houston, and all they have to do is win that game as well. So we've got Haltom winning in, South Grand Prairie winning in, Arlington Martin got to win by 8. If Arlington Martin can win that game by 8, then they are going to be in the playoffs as well. And then South Grand Prairie will have gone from the 2 seed right on out.
Well, okay, I got you. You have a lot of that last statement you made have a lot of teams in there, because you have Bowie already in and Arlington already in. Then you just said if Martin wins by 8, they're in. If South Grand Prairie wins, they're in. If Haltom wins, they're in. That's 5 teams in there. Which if Martin wins by 8 and SG,
they take that tiebreaker away.
Okay,
they take that tiebreaker away from
Martin.
Martin.
Martin's out. Once SGP and Haltom wins, then that's it for Martin.
That's it for. That's a wrap.
I got you.
So Martin's got to hope for all these people to lose and get in that 3-loss tiebreaker. And once they're in that 3-loss tiebreaker, then they can do some things. And then you got Haltom. If Haltom lost to Sam Houston, they get into that tiebreaker situation. And there's all kinds of different teams that can get into this tiebreaker. You can get South Grand Prairie can avoid it. Haltom can avoid it. But Haltom has a way better chance to avoid it than South Grand Prairie does. South Grand Prairie's got to beat Bowie to avoid it. If they beat it, they're in, and they're in at the 2 seed. But if they don't win, they're out. If Arlington Martin beats Arlington by 8, which I think will happen, which is kind of the presumptive area with that. But you got 5 teams. Arlington, Lamar, you're done. They're out. They got the shovel. Sam Houston and Grand Prairie, they're out. Only 5 teams are eligible to make the playoffs. But the only teams that I have making the playoffs right now, no matter what, is Arlington Bowie. Arlington can even kind of can have a tough luck loss if Haltom gets in there and gets involved in that tiebreaker situation. But in a 3-way scenario with South Grand Prairie, Arlington, and Arlington Lamar, or Arlington Martin, South Grand Prairie would be the hard luck team that gets out of that if Arlington Martin wins by 8 or more.
Right. All right, my head's spinning, but it's wild that we really haven't given Arlington any kind of flowers or respect since they had their bye week. But if you look before their bye week, they picked up those crucial wins that they need to put them in the situation that you just discussed. And one of them was an absolute butt kicking of South Grand Prairie. It makes you wonder, how did South Grand Prairie give up those 60 points to Arlington, to a team that is really kind of struggling since September's over? Yeah, they beat Sam Houston and Grand Prairie, which most do, but they really got their butts kicked. And you're thinking that the Martin can win by 8+ for sure. I guess we got to give them their flowers for beating Haltom and SGP early, because now they're looking at it looks like a game against Jesuit probably, or something like that. One of those teams, or as it appears.
And good news for them. I mean, it depends if they go D1, the 1st seed or the 2nd seed, which is still up for grabs. That's depending on how it kind of shakes out in this, because everything is pretty much set up in this district. We know Arlington Bowie is going to be, well, I guess it would be the second seed because Arlington Bowie is locked in at the D2-1 seed. So they get the more favorable game, which, could end up being, Richardson or in that situation. Actually, I think it would actually be yeah, it would be Richardson Pierce, who's the D2-1 seed over there. So Richardson Pierce will play the worst of the 8-6A teams, and Arlington Bowie will play the worst of the 7-6A teams, which I think will end up being Jesuit. So you got Jesuit and Arlington Bowie in the first round. And that's a scary game for Arlington Bowie because Arlington Bowie's been in the muck and the mire of this 8-6A. And you remember their non-district schedule where they just kind of got beat up by teams like
Right.
Marcus and Keller. So, it's like now that they're back out of Arlington ISD and playing other teams, I think I might be inclined to take Jesuit over Arlington Bowie in the first round. But that's for next week, Ward.
That is for next week. We'll discuss it when we absolutely know what the playoff situations are. All right, 9-6A is just about done, but there's some seeding stuff to deal with. Talk to us about 9-6A, and there's actually chances of other teams making it in that we haven't talked about. But we feel Naaman Forest is in, right? That's the 4.
Yeah, I think that there are mathematical possibilities for Naaman Forest to not make the playoffs, but it would involve South Garland and North Garland doing things that they perhaps probably shouldn't do. But I also want to use this opportunity to kind of talk about a very obscure rule that sometimes I overlook, and I know you probably overlook it at times as well. And it's really an important thing to consider with this is that there are 2 seedings that you get when you are doing these playoffs. You get your D1 first seed, D1 second seed, D2 first seed, and D2 second seed. But you also get seeded within your district 1, 2, 3, and 4. If your district seed is higher than your opponent's district seed, you get a home game. If it is the same, then you go neutral site. And so one of these 2 things could happen. So with Wiley and Wiley East, this game is important not only for city purposes, but it could determine who gets a home game in the first round of the playoffs, or you don't get a home game in the first round of the playoffs. And I know for Wiley East and Wiley, these are very important things playing Rockwall, Rockwall teams and Longview teams. So you don't want to necessarily have to deal with having to have a road game if that potentially, it won't be Longview because Longview is locked into the number 1 seed. But with Rockwall could end up being 2, 3, or 4. So, depending on what happens in that game, it does matter for Wiley. And that's why you see certain situations. I think it happened last year where you actually had a D2-2. I think it was Jesuit in Arlington or something, where we had to call them up and they were like, Diggs is right. We have to flip our thing. And all of a sudden, even though Jesuit was D2-2 playing Arlington, who was D2-1, Arlington was the 3rd seed, Arlington was the 4th seed, Jesuit was the 3rd seed, so they ended up getting to have the home game because a lot of people just think the first is what matters, and it's not. It's where you fit in with your district. So that will matter for the Wiley East game, but Wiley East should be a 5-6 touchdown favorite. So, I mean, Wiley's going to be sitting here saying, if we can somehow win this game, but it is a little bit of a rivalry game. But Wiley, it seems like when they play the good teams, they're not even competitive in those games.
Yeah, I do remember that. And you're right. I do look past it every year. Something like that happens, and I do remember you caused an uproar, or we caused an uproar by bringing that up. Why aren't they getting a home game? But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Now we figured it out. Now, which 10-6A teams you got going to playoffs? Because as we talked about earlier, Heath has now played themselves in a win in your end game, which we didn't think probably would happen a couple, 2-3 weeks ago. But now here they are. If they can beat Forney, they're in the show.
And here's Forney doing their best Undertaker impersonation. I saw Javian Osborne fought through his injury, and he's back in there. He had a big game against Tyler Legacy, and they absolutely destroyed Tyler Legacy. And remember, Tyler Legacy they already beat Rockwall Heath. And even though they're done, we sent them off the basketball season. But because Rockwall Heath beat Rockwall, this has made this straight up a win and end game for Rockwall Heath. I got to go with Rockwall Heath. They're just incredibly hot right now, and Forney has been so inconsistent, and their defense just hasn't shown up. Rockwall Heath has shown that they have a middle average defense, but their offense is really good. I don't think Forney's going to be able to shut Rockwall Heath down, but I think Rockwall Heath's defense is good enough to shut down what Forney is going to do. So after all of the hype we gave to Forney and Melissa, 2 teams that we thought would be, and Cedar Hill, these are all teams and Plano East, all teams that we thought were no-brainer playoff teams, may not make the playoffs for it.
We had Forney as the district winner early on, and then we were told that we didn't give Longview the respect they deserved. And we were right about that. So you want to go ahead and apologize to Longview for the two of us?
How they graduated everybody, Ward, and just said we rode in Longview. We don't care. Meet Boozy Washington.
Yeah, exactly.
500 yards and 10 touchdowns against Rockwall, or whatever ridiculous numbers he put. That's almost not an exaggeration, by the way. I think it was like 450 and 8 or something.
They run that sweep like nobody's business. That sweep has been perfect for them. Tell me about the importance of the Rockwall North Forney game as well while we're still here.
Well, that matters for as far as, if Rockwall wins this game, they'll be second place. If North Forney wins this game, they'll be second place. And that could matter as far as, where you go in. I think Rockwall will beat North Forney. I think North Forney kind of, they beat up on the bad teams, and they got the win over Rockwall Heath with a late win. So I think a lot of people got a little bit excited about North Forney. Remember, I kept telling you, North Forney lost to Plano East in Skyline. Yeah. So let's pull back the brakes. You're looking good in district, but you're beating Royce City and Tyler Legacy. Let's wait till you start playing some of the good teams. And we saw what happened. Rockwall gave them a big 21-0 on them, which you're smart picking Legend Bay 2 weeks ago instead of last week, because there were not much stats up for that. But Rockwall has a chance to basically overcome that loss against Rockwall Heath by beating North Forney, and then all of a sudden they're back in that number 2 spot as the D1 seed. But if they lose that game, then all of a sudden, if Rockwall Heath wins that game, you get it flipped. And now all of a sudden, you got Rockwall Heath as that D1 seed. You got Rockwall as that D1 seed. And you look over there and you see Saxe at D1, and that's going to make Saxe Rockwall your game. So it's going to be Saxe versus Rockwall, or Saxe versus Rockwall Heath if Rockwall Heath beats Forney. If Forney gets in, then all of a sudden, we're flipping North Forney up to D1, and then you might see a Saxe North Forney game in that very first game.
You're blowing people's minds today, buddy. They're all trying to write this down. You go too fast. They're writing like crazy. They'll get it. That's why we do it on YouTube. You can rewind it and pause and all that stuff, and then write down everything they just tell you.
And there's a 50% chance I'm wrong, because I'm just going off of my memory on some of these things. So that's always a potential.
10 more years that we're doing this, and we're not going to be able to rely on that memory much longer. It's going to be gone. All right, 11-6A. We know the teams. We just need to know where they're going to fall in. Lancaster needs an upset of DeSoto to move around a little bit. Talk to me about that game.
Yeah, and that matters because 12-6A is a district where you got to travel, and although, you're not talking about just, massively great teams. I don't want to go to Temple. Temple is one of those places where you don't want to go play a first round game. Killeen Harker Heights, I know we got to see some of these Shoemaker and some of these teams when they were part of the district with Midlothian and Red Oak and Lake Belton and some of those teams over last year. And I know you hated those 2 years. Those were the worst 2 years of your life when we're talking about Lake Belton and all of that. Now we don't even get to talk about Lake Belton except for hypotheticals and how much you hated covering Lake Belton. You had to do Bally's trades to get Lake Belton footage on our air.
It's quite a journey to get those scrub teams on there. Go ahead.
You hated me for that. But you definitely don't want to go on that road trip. And Lancaster would have to go to Killeen Harker Heights as of right now if they don't beat DeSoto. DeSoto's going to be a big favorite, but it could flip that D1 and D2. And also, if you are able to get by a team like Harker Heights in the first round, the second round game would be against Longview, if you're in that second seeded spot. So I think there is a lot of benefit to getting up into that first seed. I think DeSoto's a pretty big favorite to do that, but I mean, there is some meaning for this Lancaster and DeSoto game.
And Lancaster is kind of used to playing Longview, so maybe they'll enjoy that one, which I'm already early predicting that'll be at Mesquite Memorial. We all know Longview loves playing there. All right, let's move down to 5A, 5A Division I. By the way, Cedar Hill's going to finish 3-7 on the year this year. That's an absolute shocker. Do you have a second or third shovel we can throw their way? That's crazy.
And all right. That is one of the worst, performances given the talent. Yes. you have to call a shovel. Well, when it comes to that, Melissa, Cedar Hill, and Forney still has a chance. Cedar Hill has no chance. They're done, and it's bad. And I think you have to do a lot of, I don't think you have to do a lot of soul searching about what the chemistry was of the team, what the makeup was, and why that didn't work at all. And I know that Cedar Hill is going to have to do a lot of reflection on that because the talent was there. You got 3 kids going to Texas on on your offensive line. You got a kid coming in from North Forney who threw for 2,000 yards as a junior. You got all of your running backs coming back, and you go 3-7. That's a problem. And it kind of reminds me of Denton Ryan a couple of years ago, where it was just a chemistry thing that the kids didn't seem to work well together. And the coaches ultimately have to work with that. That's the chemistry issue that they have to be responsible for. But Cedar Hill is absolutely a disappointment. And I know the Ward family. I know that Coach Ward will figure out what it is and put whatever steps in to fix that. But absolute disappointment. I don't think he would run away from that criticism by any means.
You're right. All right, 3-5A Division One. We know the teams. The only thing that can be flipped up here is if Azle beats Richland, and all of a sudden they can move up to 3 and not 4. In the long run, I'm not quite sure. Well, maybe it will matter a little bit because that Azle game against 4-5A Division One could be a challenge, but the other ones probably should sweep through. But talk about that playoff situation.
Well, one thing to keep in mind a little bit, and next week we're gonna get back to our I like doing this tradition last year. We'll do it this year. We'll kind of we'll name the brackets. This is the Alito bracket. This is the Highland Park bracket, and you don't want to be in the Alito bracket, and whoever's in the 4th seeded position has to play Alito in the 3rd round of the playoffs. And we're talking about Denton Ryan and Richland, being two teams that could potentially get back to play them. So they would probably play each other in the 3rd round of the playoffs if they win their first 2 rounds of their playoff games to decide who would play Alito. But if you're in that 4th seed and you win your first 2 games, now you're looking at Alito again. So that there is a meaning for that game, and you definitely want to avoid Alito as long as you can play them. So I don't think Azle is going to make it that far, if we're being honest. There seems to be a pretty big drop off. I mean, I think Alito put up 77 against Azle. It was like that hot knife through butter, Ward. And I know you like your butter. You put butter on everything, Ward. You got fajitas. You're asking them for extra butter and all kinds of things.
Ridiculous.
Have heart health, Ward.
Exactly.
Go to a cardiologist tomorrow, Ward.
I'm up in the heart medicine. And after this coming Tuesday, I'm probably going to up the heart medicine too. Let's go into 4-5A Division One.
All that said, Richland's going to beat Azle big.
Yeah.
But it could happen. Could happen. They could jump up to 3.
I guess. Talk to me about 4-5A Division One and what the meaningful games are here for this district.
This is a weird situation where you got all 4 teams that have actually clinched, and all 4 teams are playing each other right now and to kind of get ready for the playoffs. And given how bad this bottom of this district is, I think that's an important game to kind of get a little bit of momentum for them, because you're looking at Alito, you're looking at Denton Ryan, and you're looking at Richland, and you're like, the only team that probably has a legitimate chance to win the first round playoff game is Saginaw, who is locked in. And it doesn't matter if Saginaw even gets upset by Chisholm Holmes; they're still the number 1 seed, so they're good. Chisholm Holmes is looking at Alito in the first round.
Chisholm Trail.
Yeah,
Chisholm Trail.
That's bad. Chisholm Trail.
I don't know who Holmes is. You kept saying Chisholm Holmes. Who's Chisholm Holmes? I don't know who that is.
Oh, that's what Alonzo calls them. He calls them the Fighting Chisholm Holmeses. So okay. That's what I have in my head. But you got Rickland Holmes, who's the coach over there.
Okay, I got you. All right. Sorry, I thought you were on a wild.
The Chisholm Holmes.
By the way, kudos to Saginaw, who could go 10-0. Who would have said that last year or 2 years ago?
Whatever. We were talking about that. I think you hypotheticalized that.
But I'm saying before we knew what the new district would be, who would have thought that a Saginaw team in the district they were in before could ever go 10-0? They're in a favorable.
Then you got Pascal.
Yeah,
and you got Arlington
Heights. What do you think about that one?
They're playing for the 2nd seed, and that gets you a home game. So at least you get to be at home when you're getting Denton Ryan or Richland to come over and to beat you. So I think that's important for you. It's a little bit of a lesser blow to have that kind of a thing, to have Richland come into your home and beat you. Richland Arlington Heights is at least an interesting game. Pascal just that was one I think I was a little bit wrong on. Pascal just hasn't looked great. I mean, they had that one game against Chisholm Trail that they looked great in, but then I found out that Chisholm Trail had like 8 players out, and you have those kind of things that happen. So I think Arlington Heights is going to beat Pascal and get that 2nd seed, and then Pascal's got to make that trip to Denton Ryan. Are you going to send a camera crew out to that one, Pascal against Denton Ryan?
We'll see what Ballas can do for me. They may get 20 seconds out of that joint. All right, 5-5A Division One. We got a championship matchup on Thursday at the Star. I will not shoot that one because I've been to the Star the last 2 Thursdays. I can't keep going back there. So
Why
we'll see
not?
Teddy ball game over there. I think keep going back to the same place.
You went to Waxahachie for like 8 straight weeks. Why can't you
That
go to the
wasn't
Star
me,
for 8
buddy
straight
boy.
weeks?
That wasn't me. I diversified.
Everything is you. You are the
I need to
face.
see
You got
everybody.
the hat on. I don't have the hat on.
I
You've
need
got
to
the hat
see
on. It's
everybody.
all you.
I haven't seen Waxahachie play once this year. I've had other shooters there. Now I have personally been to the Star each and every time that I've been there. So somebody else is going. The fact of the matter is, it's Lone Star and Reedy. Reedy needed 5 turnovers to win by 10 points over Frisco. Lone Star struggling without Gross in there. At least they don't. They may or may not have Gross playing. Davion Gross, and then the other teams are set up as well, right? McKinney North is in, Wakeland's in. Talk to me about this district, these playoff teams, and what's going to happen in that championship game, district title game.
My 5A insiders tell me he's done for the year. Whether or not that's true, I mean, the only thing that the morning news will officially say on it, because these coaches don't like to come out there and say, oh, they're gone. They want to have you have that reasonable doubt to make you kind of playing for them. But what you'll hear the morning news say is he's walking in a walking boot, which is generally not a good thing if you're in a walking boot that you're going to be playing. But I've seen some coaches put kids in the walking boot and they play the next week. So, it happens. If you remember Austin Iglesias from last year, Paradise versus Brock, he was in a walking boot all week and he ended up playing in that game. So you can't guarantee that a walking boot is a death sentence for you not playing, but I hear that he will not be playing. And one of the things that Lone Star is doing because of this, which kind of impacted you in fantasy this week, is that they're trying to figure out if Carice Hoyt should be the running back instead of the quarterback. So they had John Madden. They resurrected John Madden, and they brought John Madden out there. Took him off the bus. Let's go be a starter out here. And all of a sudden, John Madden's out there throwing 12 of 13 for like 4 touchdowns when you needed Carice Hoyt to be the quarterback in that game.
Anything that can go wrong, buddy boy. Anything that could go wrong in fantasy goes wrong for your boy. And I know my fans hate it, but keep going.
But both these teams have just been hit by the injury bug. The offensive line for Frisco Reedy just does not look like what it looked like when they played Emerson this year. Their tight end is hurt. Their big players are still in there, but kind of that we always refer to it as the infrastructure war. The infrastructure of Frisco Reedy is pretty much decimated. I think Lone Star, because they've had a couple of weeks knowing that Gross is likely not going to play in this game or in the playoffs, they've tinkered with enough to where I think they're going to be a big favorite over Frisco Reedy. But where I think losing Gross is going to hurt them is in their playoff run. I don't see Lone Star as being a major threat in this region at all anymore. I don't think Frisco Reedy is going to be a big threat in this region either. I think we're seeing a district championship of kind of 2 broken kind of teams. I think the most dangerous team in 5A Division I is the only team not playing this week, and that's Frisco Wakeland. Frisco Wakeland's got to figure out, are we going to be the 3 seed or the 4 seed? Because if Frisco is able to beat McKinney North, that could pull them into a situation where they could go up to the 3 seed instead of the 4 seed. Which avoids West Mesquite in the first round. And I think West Mesquite would probably rather see McKinney North in the first round than Frisco Wakeland, because Frisco Wakeland is hot right now. They are a very dangerous team. They have figured it out. Their young skill players have kind of evolved and kind of figured out, they bought in. And every now and then, Ward, you see it. You see this team kind of figure it out. And Frisco Wakeland is that team that's figured it out. They'll be the 3rd seed or the 4th seed. McKinney North wins, they're the 4th seed. McKinney North loses, McKinney North is the 4th seed, and they would play West Mesquite in the first round.
And the reason you know so much about the 6-5A Division I side of things, because all those teams are set. We're just waiting to see who's 2 and 3, right? Because we got to wait for Newman Smith and Creekview in the big old Carrollton battle. What do you think will be at that game?
The battle of Joe. How about Kenny?
Kenny will be there all the time. Anytime Newman Smith's got any kind of relation to a big game, he's there. Heck, I think he went to an Ranchview game last week. The man's Carrollton through and through, man. They love him over there.
How about Sark? Will Sark be there?
Yeah. Are they going to fly their helicopter in? They'll maybe fly over it and keep on going to Plano East. Tell me about your thoughts on that game. I kind of feel like that's a Newman Smith win, but you might tell me otherwise.
I feel like it's a Newman Smith win as well. And I want to give credit to Newman Smith because they played West Mesquite a lot closer than I thought they were going to play them, which kind of gives me a little bit of pause about West Mesquite in their first round playoff games. I don't think any of the other teams are going to win their first round game. I think West Mesquite is the only one in 6-5A that has a chance. I think Newman Smith beats Carrollton Creekview by at least 3 scores. That gets them a home game because they'll be the second seed. But I think them playing against McKinney North in the first round, if McKinney North wins their game and ends up as the third seed, I don't like that matchup for McKinney North. I don't like that matchup for Newman Smith at all because McKinney North is so good at running the ball. I think Newman Smith, they'll just have a field day with them.
Run all over. All right, let's talk about 7-5A. Another wild one last week between Midlothian and Red Oak. They always put up some sweet games for us to be at. I think this is the third year in a row it's been a wild one. But Midlothian came out of it undefeated in district, which means their game with Highland Park is for the district title. But gosh darn it, Highland Park's on another level here. They have no problem playing back in 5As. They're just dominating teams.
Yeah, Midlothian, when you think about their earlier games, they've really kind of thrived in these games where the defense isn't very good for the teams, and you get into these shootout kind of situations where they're very good. The difference in this game against Red Oak was they only had 3 completions, but all 3 completions were touchdowns, and that's kind of where Midlothian kind of excels. They only want to throw the ball 3 or 4 times, but they want those to be touchdowns. They want those to be big plays. Highland Park is going to shut that down. I think Highland Park is going to win this game, kind of an ugly 28-0 game where you might have people complaining about where are Midlothian highlights and this kind of a thing. I don't think you're going to have Midlothian highlights just because they're not going to exist in this game. I think Highland Park is a big favorite, will take care of business and win their district championship. And right now, I think Highland Park is by far a 2-touchdown favorite to get out of this region just over anybody they play.
They're playing Buck Randall type football. They're looking real sweet. By the way, if you are a fan of a certain team that we have a camera at, try to advise their team to do something in the first half because we got 2 games to go to for every camera that goes out. And if we can't get your highlights in the first half because we're going 3 and out, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I know you score late, but that's against backups. Anyway, let's move on, shall we? To Division 2.
Look at Ward answering some criticism right there.
Well,
just kind of laying it off the line.
Just opening up the curtain a little bit here, just letting you know we need some highlights early. I'm not going to show a 2-yard run. I can't do it. I just can't do it. The fans don't want to see it. I know Diggs didn't want to see it. It's a basic highlight. All right, moving down to Division 2. 3-5A Division 2. This playoff situation is set, right? Pretty much. Well, no, it's not set. We got one huge game.
We got
one huge game on Thursday. And a camera will be back at Wildman Field. I tell you what, Wildman Field has not gotten this much camera action from us. Maybe we'll get the lights replaced over there so it's a little bit brighter on the field. But we've been out there at least 4 or 5 times, and we're going out there again. Summit and Seguin.
And you're saying goodbye because Wyland, they're retiring the stadium to rebuild it. So we're saying goodbye to that. I can't wait to see the new Arlington ISD facilities. They're building, I guess, Martin's practice field is turning into a brand new stadium, and we're going to do redo Wyland. And I after going there to watch the Colleyville Heritage game where you basically ignored me because you're working, like I don't got time for you Diggs against Seguin and
I will not be ignored. Heritage. What he said. He pulled a Glenn Close line out.
Well, you got pictures of you and Kenny. You're mugging with everybody, but then I'm there. You're like, I don't got time for you over here.
No time for
Wyland, you're getting that nice upgrade. You need it, by the way. Going there, I was like, oh, that's a little bit rough, but can't do those little maintenance things when you're rebuilding the stadium. So it makes a little bit of sense. Good fiscal sense to not rebuild the stadium right before you're about to rebuild the stadium. But you got Weileman, you got Mike Mansfield Summit, you got Arlington Seguin that will be playing for their lives. Timberview is done. They don't play any game this week, and they are in the playoffs because again, it's that same situation with Flower Mound. In Flower Mound Marcus, the one game that Timberview lost, they lost by 1. So they're already in a good point position if that happens. So if Summit beats Seguin, then you're going to have Summit 3, Timberview 4. But if Seguin can beat Summit, then they can start earning the points to overcome their point deficit and potentially get into the playoff situation. I don't think they're going to beat Summit. And again, just kind of like with Flower Mound, if they do beat Summit the way they play, I don't see them just heating up Summit to the point where they can get a max win to overcome that. So I think we're going to end up with Summit at 3 and Timberview at 4. And Seguin, just like Melissa, is that hard luck thing. And again, if you saw my thing on the dump a couple of weeks ago, I think, Ward, we should have the Inside High School Sports NIT tournament where we invite all the fifth place teams from 9-team districts into this. And we can have Plano East, we can have Melissa, we can have Arlington Seguin, and some of these fifth place teams, maybe like WTY or not WTY, like North Mesquite or Molina. We'll get them in there, and we'll have a nice little 16-team bracket, Ward.
Nice little fifth place bracket. The winner gets a little fifth place trip. Nice. I like
You're the state champion of fifth place.
I like that idea.
Tell me it's a bad idea. It's not a bad
idea. You gotta sign off on the insurance for that extra game that none of the schools have anything to do sponsor with, and we're in it, and we're in it to win. All right, 405A Division II. We know all the teams that are in there, and we pretty much know where their spots are too, right?
Yeah, all four of these teams play all four of the bad teams this week, so we're done. Even if anybody loses, we were pretty much locked in. Now, I mean, there are hypotheticals where if Walnut Grove lost to whoever they're playing and Lovejoy won, but these teams are all 40 to 50-point favorites over the Frisco teams and Denison teams. So unless something unlike that happens, these teams are locked in. You're going to have Walnut Grove as your number 1 seed, Lovejoy is your number 2 seed, Anna is your number 3 seed, and Frisco Emerson is your number 4 seed. Frisco Emerson's done. They don't have to play a game this week, so they don't have to have any risk of if this happens or if they lose to Frisco Liberty or something. But no matter what any of these other teams do, they're pretty much locked in.
And also, after last week, I'm done calling Hayes Hackney a freshman. He's earned his way up to freshman plus status because that guy is a hoss, and nothing bothers him. He stands in the pocket. He takes his hits. He throws. He runs. Not a freshman anymore in my eyes. He's freshman plus.
Would you say a 2027 bobblehead or a 2028 bobblehead?
Well, I'd still have to say 2028, but he doesn't feel like a freshman to me. I gotta get me.
But you're making him wait till a senior year to get a bobblehead.
Yes, he's got to wait on it.
You can't wait to get it as a junior. Because you can't get it as a sophomore. Because you already got next year's bobbleheads already decided. Because that's what you do. You're already doing that. But you can't even get him there as a junior.
No, we're gonna wait till he's a senior, man. It's cumulative. We give him to cumulative high school player. What if he has a dud junior way? We don't know. Dud junior year, I mean.
What if he moves to Oklahoma and then back down like Kevin Sperry?
And he's going to miss out. It's going to be a tough situation. Don't move on me. All right, 5-5A Division II. You got to talk to me about these scenarios now that we went over it once, go over it twice.
Well, let's go over a little bit more because Dave Campbell's insider, Matthew Stepp, has reported that, and he's the only one who's reported on this as of the time we're taping this, that there is a DEC investigation into alleged ineligible players that have been at Samuel, and currently the coach is on administrative leave, and they're going to have a hearing early this week to determine whether or not those kids are ineligible and if they should forfeit the games. And currently the recommendation to the DEC that will have to be voted on is that they will forfeit all wins that they've had this year. If they do that, that will mean that Samuel has gone from in the playoffs, either second or third seed. They're done. So now we would be taking them out, and then all of a sudden you've got Seagoville versus Adamson as potentially your fourth playoff game, and then Hillcrest versus Woodrow Wilson this week will be for your second seed versus your third seed, which is important because that gets you a home game, and that's important when you're playing Kaufman and Crandall and teams like that, because you don't want to go to one of those. Midlothian Heritage is a hard place to win. Crandall is potentially your number 2 seed over there, so you don't want to go to Crandall. You don't want to go to Midlothian Heritage, but you got to win the game. So it was a situation where with Samuel in the playoffs, Woodrow Wilson would have had to win by enough to make it a 3-way tie. But now it's just going to be straight up if they're deemed ineligible. If they're not deemed ineligible, then all of a sudden Seagoville versus Adamson means nothing, and then Woodrow Wilson would play Hillcrest still, and they would have to win that game by enough points to overcome that 3-way tiebreaker. Then all of a sudden, that's how they would get into that number 2 seed. But my understanding from talking to some of the coaches and what I've read the evidence on is they will be deemed ineligible. And if they are deemed ineligible, they will not be in the playoffs. And then Seagoville versus Adamson would be for your fourth playoff spot. They have to go play Midlothian Heritage, potentially. How do you feel about that game, Ward? Where do you feel about Midlothian Heritage and Seagoville, or Midlothian Heritage and Adamson?
I don't even know if I'll call Bally's on that one. I'll just have to read about it on Pigskin Prep, find out how it went down. Oh boy! All right, you talked about Midlothian Heritage. Talk to us more about 6-5A Division II and how that kind of shakes out.
Yeah, we have two potential three-way ties that could happen if things that we don't expect to happen. But we always can't rule it out. There is a Coffin plays Midlothian Heritage this week. If Coffin beats Midlothian Heritage, then you have a situation where you would have a three-way tie for first place. Am I boring you, Ward?
No, because Crandall is definitely no. Well, yes, you are boring me, but not because of your information, just your deliveries all kinds of ways. But
I know I'm working on it.
You're not giving Greenville a chance. You're not giving Greenville a chance against Crandall. How about that? Unbelievable.
I know. If that doesn't happen, then you could have a three-way tie to where points create a situation to where Midlothian Heritage is still pretty much going to be locked into that first seed because they maxed out Crandall. Remember that big game where they just completely dominated them? And Crandall only beat Coffin by 7. So if Coffin is able to beat Midlothian Heritage, then they could actually get that second seed, hypothetically, over Crandall, despite the fact that Crandall beat them straight up. Now, given the scores that we've seen out of Midlothian Heritage, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not very worried about that, but it is potentially a possibility. Now you got the same thing that could happen on the bottom half with Terrell, Poteet, and Ennis, because Ennis, they did it for Sam. They gave Sam a send off. I had Poteet beating Ennis, and Ennis beat him by 50 points, as happens with my picks sometimes. But mathematically, if Ennis is able to beat Corsicana, and which I think is a very strong possibility, and Poteet upsets Terrell, then Ennis slides into that fourth spot. But if Poteet can beat Terrell and Corsicana beats Ennis, then Poteet can slide in to that fourth spot. I got Terrell as my fourth team.
I was going to say that's a tough ask considering Terrell's the only team to play Midlothian Heritage worth the darn in the district. They got a decent squad. They just can't come up with the wins in some of the bigger games. I think they can probably beat Poteet. That'll be their motto throughout running through the hallways. Beat Poteet. Beat Poteet.
The bad news is South Oak Cliff first round.
Lose to Poteet. No, just kidding. They still want to give them a shot. Man, talk to me about this Panther Creek squad. That's one of those games where if you go to the game, you better stay to the end, and sometimes that end can be 3-4 hours later. How about that game against Aubrey last week?
Creek? Every year we have a Frisco ISD school that just does this. If you remember the crazy Reedy endings 2 years ago, and then last year we had the crazy Lone Star endings, and now we're having the crazy Panther Creek endings. You were at the Lake Dallas game, so you got to see that. And what are we going to do to follow that up? How about a game against Aubrey where they score late, and now we have controversy yet again? Our guy, Kyle Yeomans, who's calling these games for Frisco ISD, has had 2 straight endings where it's like, what just happened? Remember, he had that Wakeland game.
What just
were just incredible, the Wakeland Lone Star ending, and now he had the Aubrey in Frisco Panther Creek ending where was he down or was he not down? I am a referee apologist because I think we need more TASO officials in getting on a thing like this and criticizing officials. It's just not good for in general. But I watched that from 2 different angles. I can't, even if if you can go slow motion and blow that up and maybe see that his knee landed on an offensive lineman's elbow or the back of his knee, you got to call that.
That's one of those deals where if you hear a fan tweet out, "I was there and I saw his knee was on a player," that fan is lying to you because there's no decisive view, and it's certainly not just like that. Maybe they're looking at replays, and even then you can't see it that well because we saw replays. But go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, they got so I want to defend the officials in that because I know people were like, you didn't miss that call. I mean, that was a horrible play by Aubrey, by the way. The play comes like run it up the middle. Maybe they've been getting that all night or something, But Panther Creek, they're not that good this year, but they find ways to win these incredible games just out of the middle of nowhere with these 2-point conversions that go one way or go another way. But man, Panther Creek they're guaranteed to have some sort of weird endings just about every single
week. What kind of
week.
weird ending are they going to have with Sulphur Springs this week? Because Sulphur Springs looks pretty doggone good as well.
They look good, but I think Panther Creek is going to call Bally's up for that one because I think that it'll be a fun one. But man, Panther Creek is living right. But after that game against Salina, I don't view them as being really competitive in this district. But you know what happened, Ward? I wrote them off last year, and all of a sudden they were one play away from Anna from winning that game. So maybe they'll get it figured out. But hasn't happened yet, Ward. Hasn't happened yet.
Well, before we move on to weekly fantasy, your thoughts on speaking about not being competitive, Brock and Graham. Brock was not competitive at all against Graham. I don't even remember a time. Well, maybe I have in early non-district games where they just can't score, and it didn't go the way I thought it would go. I didn't think they'd give up 38 points and score nothing. But your thoughts on that game?
It was funny because we talked about it last week, and I was like, okay, let's look at the Mineral Well game. Brock only won 21-0. Graham won like 37-0. I'm gonna take Brock. That's what I said. You can pull that clip out, and then that doesn't really look very good now because Graham kept that 0 going. They kind of continued that beating. Yeah, I think Brock got a definite wake up call about that game, and they make it a rematch because I think that Brock and Graham will probably be favorites to get back to the 4th round game, and I don't think Brock will lose that way. They may lose again, but this is a Graham team that lost to Springtown earlier in the year. So, I've kind of written them off as, and Springtown lost to Joshua. So we're just looking at like, oh, what's going on there? But kudos to Graham. That defense, the Steers defense, was up to the task. And Brock has had 1 or 2 of those games, back to the District 4-3A podcast I used to do. They'd always have 1 or 2 of those games in non-district where they just, what is this team? And that was it, except it was in district this year against Graham. So let's just tip our hat to Graham, and we'll see if Brock can use that as a learning mechanism, because at the end of the day, they got beat up in the trenches. And I think that's going to be a heart issue for them to determine, are we going to play harder? Are we going to be able to figure out, that stuff? Graham put in the time in the offseason, and that's where it showed up. Now, can Brock get better in these 3 or 4 weeks? And can the offensive coordinator over there figure out how to get the ball out to the edges to kind of overcome some of those deficits? I think that's what the real soul searching that they're going to have to do. But you're right, it was ugly. I don't even know how you get highlights out of that, because it was very one-sided.
To pull the curtain back again, we had Brock and Graham on the schedule to show highlights, and when they came in, I was like, man, I can't have another Burleson Centennial situation where I show nothing from one team. I better put this Munster game in against Collinsville, which actually turned out to be pretty. Kudos to Munster, who now looks probably like the best team in 2A right now. They're probably favored to go 16 weeks. The old Hornets.
They are. We could have a situation, Ward, where we've got Munster and Honeygrove in our state championships in 2A, and you're just going to have to start cutting some Duncanville North Shore time to get them all in.
Gotta cut it. All right. Let's finish it off with some weekly fantasy. It's becoming.
You hate this word. You are so.
It's beginning to be my least favorite part of the show, because your boy keeps taking beatings. Look at that record, mother. That is a bad record. That kind of looks like what the Cowboys' record's going to be in a couple weeks.
It's like the Commanders against the Cowboys right here. We got the Commanders over here and Cowboys over there.
What a beating! I got decent points out of Carice Hoyt, but Simpson didn't come through for me, which everybody remembers. That's a horrible pick comment. The whole internet was talking about it when you said that to me. Anyway, even the Simpson family called me. It was like, why does Diggs hate me so much? He hates my son. I can't believe it. Horrible pick. All right. Well, this is where I'm at. We got one more week of this. I don't have any chance. I can't even get any dignity back. Going to 4-7, that's not dignity. It's still ugly. So my ugly record will only have to be shown one more week. So let's go through who we're picking this week. Let's talk about your quarterback first. You're going to that Arlington game where you're expecting buku points, and you got Coleman Cravens in there. Am I correct on that?
I've got Coleman Cravens in there. I think you're just going to get a lot of points. I mean, you saw that with Arlington and Lamar. Martin has seemed to give up 50 to 60 to anybody with a pulse in that district. I think Cravens will be the benefit of that. I think we're going to see a lot of points in this game. I think we're going to see a lot of passing in this game because you have a situation where, even if like Arlington got down by 21, they got to get it back to 7. You got to keep fighting. You got to try to get it in there. So I think you're just going to see nonstop, no give up out of Arlington. I think Coleman Craven's going to throw the ball a lot, and I think he's going to get me a lot of yards in a high scoring shootout.
Just constantly go back and forth. I got you. Well, I couldn't go a fantasy deal without picking Buck Randall at least once because I love old Buck Randall. Buck, he saved every one of us. So hopefully Buck Randall in a district title game will do like he did against Centennial and throw for crazy yardage and do his thing here. I just love the way he's playing. And like you said, he's probably going to lead them out of this region and see what happens once we get to state semis. Hope for a big game.
2027.
He looks like it, doesn't he? He looks like a possible candidate for that. And okay, we're going with the second quarterback for Diggs. No,
Let's pull back the curtain a little bit. Let's pull back the curtain a little bit because you didn't like this. You sent me a message on this.
But the fans know you're sneaky. Everybody knows you're sneaky. You pulled another sneaky one out there. But he recently switched over to running back.
I mean, I'll tell you what I did. I decided whoever the quarterback and running back is at Arlington and Martin, I couldn't tell you the running back name at Arlington Martin. So I pulled up the last couple of games and I'm like, Fort Grants is in there. He's also in there at the pat, but he hasn't been throwing the ball. Hunter Squires has been throwing the ball. So I guess their adjustment over the disappointment over the last few weeks is to kind of do what Lone Star is doing. Maybe Lone Star got motivated by this and move your quarterback to a running back, what do they call like the Ashton Genties of the world, like a wide back, or they got some
call
names
those kind of people Heisman Trophy winners.
Well,
Let's go, Ashton. This just seems like another bully situation. Fans, if you feel like I'm being bullied yet again, feel free to write in and Twitter me. He's going to put in another quarterback at receiver. I can guarantee you that too. The guy is completely out of control. He is out of control.
3 weeks. But I hope he does throw a pass for 80 yards, just one, because
you ain't getting those points.
If he is the starter at quarterback, well, we will take off his quarterback.
Well, James Harris will be at that game, and I'll find out how many times he's behind center.
We'll find out.
And he'll let me know something.
Fort Grants is a dual
and then you
threat
get 0 for running back. If he plays quarterback, you get 0 for running back, and then maybe I can go 4-7. Because I'm going also Arlington. I haven't used Bowers yet, and I'm using him this week. You have. All they do is score points over there, so he's going to get me some big yards. We're heavy Arlington this year since those games meet, or this week because those games mean so much this week. Everybody's got to score, and they would love to knock South Grand Prairie out of this thing. So
this is very much like Week 18 NFL fantasy. You only pick the teams that have meaningful games. You got to get your players because everybody else happening. And in a district championship, to get you to that first seed matters for Lone Star. I think right now they're really leaning on their receivers because they got to try to figure out this quarterback situation, given that Davian Gross is probably out for the season. So Bryson Jones had over 180 yards receiving last week. I'm looking for him to have another big game against Reedy, and I think Reedy will have a good enough offense to push Lone Star to have to go 48 minutes. Give me Bryson Jones to give me a lot of points.
Bryson Jones. And I'm hoping that the Yellow Jackets turn the Gooch loose. The Gooch is on the loose at Rockwell, so they can get that second place in a home playoff game. I'm hoping they toss it around to him a little bit more. They got him once in the first half there against Heath, but maybe they'll go to him a lot more here against North Forney. We'll see what happens there. Regardless, I'm not going to win this there. Yeah. North Crowley just put 70 on them, so they would still have to pass like crazy.
At halftime.
Yeah, exactly. Either way, it doesn't matter. I've already lost fantasy. I failed everyone who's counted on me, which is both.
I have good news for Game Day Productions because not next week or not this week, but next week I start picking every game in the state of Texas. So your Houston side gets a little bit of extra content because I will pick every game, including Katy Pato versus
You see the way he says the team names? Don't go by his picks when you can't even say the names right. Stick to the DFW if you're going to place any kinds of friendly wagers with your friends.
Is Katie Paito?
It's Paito, guy. You sound like you're ordering some sort of ramen noodles at a
I live in Texas. I live in the good part of Texas up here. I don't live in Houston.
Oh, good Lord. Please do not make any friendly wagers on anything other than North Texas. This guy, I don't even know what he's going to say about San Antonio and El Paso teams. You ain't going to be able to say them. Veterans Memorial, you can say that one, can't you?
El Paso Parkwood, I can say that. They're a good team. El Paso Riverside.
What's the one that's
not Austin Westlake? I can say
Amarillo, Tascosa. You'll be reading those.
But they're not good this year, so they won't argue with me. It's only when they're good that they'll argue.
Next week, postseason talk, buddy. Then we got 6 weeks of postseason talk.
Are you going to book 3 hours for next week, Ward?
I'm booking the same we went here, which is an hour and 20. How about that, buddy?
Give me 3 hours next week, Ward.
Hey, we won't have the fantasy talk, which took about 2 minutes.
There you go.
So, that's going to chop off 2 minutes.
Nobody gets any flowers or shovels anymore.
I was going to say, you're going to throw any shovels out there?
Off both ends.
All right. We're just going to analyze them. I appreciate it.
We will name brackets next week, so you can find out, what your favorite bracket is named. We're going to have the Coppell bracket or the North Crowley bracket. Tune in to find out.
Perfect. All right, brother. I will talk to you next week.
Keep digging for wisdom, Ward.